Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela. Her mother, Andrina Bermudos Millian, was originally from Matarin, Monegasque, while her father, Leonardo Salazar, was from Tucupita, a town in the state of Delta Amacuro. In September 2016, a year after Paula was born, the couple chose to immigrate to Ecuador with their daughter. They hoped to find better opportunities for themselves and for Paula. Soon after settling in Quito, Ecuador's capital, tensions within the family began to grow for several reasons. Eventually, Andrina decided to separate from Leonardo and moved with Paula to Cuenca, the third largest city in Ecuador. In Cuenca lived the mother of Andrina's best friend. She generously offered them a place to stay while they looked for a new home and searched for work. Meanwhile, due to the circumstances and their separation, Leonardo chose to return to Venezuela. Later, he emigrated once more, this time to Trinidad and Tobago. Leonardo had been disabled for many years. An accident during his youth had left his left arm completely incapacitated. Because of this disability, it was difficult for him to obtain stable employment even in Quito. After moving to Cuenca, Andrina nearly cut off communication with Leonardo altogether. She informed him only once that she had found work on a farm in Tabacundo. A few months after separating from Leonardo, Andrina began a new relationship with Washington Andreas Imero, a local Ecuadorian and the owner of the farm where she worked. Washington came from a wealthy family. When Paula was around 18 months old, Andrina moved in with Washington along with Paula. On April 7, 2019, Andrina and Washington welcomed a child together. This period brought happiness and unity to the family. However, everything changed dramatically on March 27, 2020. An incident occurred that had a profound impact on the lives of everyone involved. During that time, the family was living comfortably, enjoying their days on the farm, and everything seemed to be going well. One day, Andreas decided to take Paula by car to the flower plantations. However, on the way there, the girl suddenly became very ill. She felt dizzy and began vomiting. With no other option, Andreas stopped at a public restroom. As soon as they entered, Paula vomited again. Andreas then chose to leave her alone for a few minutes while he returned to the car to get a change of clothes since hers were dirty. When he returned, he found Paula lying with her head inside the toilet bowl. He immediately pulled her out and attempted to provide first aid before rushing her to the hospital. By the time the 4-year-old was handed over to medical staff, she was showing no signs of life. Doctors declared Paula dead after conducting an initial examination. They soon noticed inconsistencies in Andreas's account. For example, they observed bruises on her body and face that did not align with his explanation. In such cases, medical protocol requires doctors to inform the police, which they did immediately. Police arrived shortly afterward and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's death. Although he claimed that she had drowned in the toilet bowl, the autopsy revealed a far more disturbing reality. Tests indicated that Paula had been dead for about 24 hours by the time she arrived at the hospital. This finding contradicted Andreas's timeline of events. He said that he had performed first aid and cardiopulmonary resuscitation on her only 20 minutes before taking her to the hospital. Additionally, the autopsy revealed serious injuries: several broken ribs, multiple microtraumas, a fractured spine, and sepsis, all of which contributed to her death. It became evident that Paula's death was not an accident. Her small body showed numerous injuries, both recent and old. Paula's father, Leonardo Salazar, learned about her death on March 30th, several days after the events had occurred. His mother, who was still living in Venezuela, informed him by phone. She had found out through a friend of Andrina's. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andrina started a new relationship and stopped communicating with him entirely. As a result, Leonardo remained unaware of the tragedy for 3 days. During that time, he could only see Paula through photos sent by Andrina and their mutual friends. In addition, Andrina blocked Leonardo on all social media platforms, preventing him from having any form of communication with Paula. She also cut off contact with nearly all of Leonardo's relatives. It is worth noting that she managed to turn most of their mutual friends against Leonardo by portraying him as uninterested in maintaining a relationship with Paula. Despite these difficulties, Leonardo remained determined to find out what had happened to his daughter. However, Andrina's family offered a different explanation for her death. At the time, Ecuador, like much of the world, was under quarantine due to the pandemic. Naturally skeptical of this claim, Leonardo began researching virus-related deaths in the country through social media and news websites. He soon discovered that none of the few reported victims were children. With help from his relatives, Leonardo continued investigating. One relative sent him a newspaper article reporting the arrest of Andreas on suspicion of Paula's murder. Determined to find answers, he called Andrina every day until she finally returned his call 10 days later. Because her lawyers had forbidden her to speak, the next step Leonardo took was to create a Facebook page with an acquaintance of his. This page was dedicated to Paula. They also set up an Instagram profile called Justice for Paula. The posts they published caused a huge backlash across social media, the main goal to bring those responsible for his daughter's death to justice. On the same day that Andrina called Leonardo, she arrived at the morgue to begin arranging her daughter's funeral. Even though the prosecutor working on the case asked for more time to investigate the body, Paula's funeral still took place on April 10, 2020. Andrina did not allow a second autopsy to be performed on Paula. Thanks to information posted on social media and shared by Andrina's friends, people in her circle contacted Leonardo and told him about Paula's sad life before her death. They sent Leonardo various pieces of information they had collected, most of which were isolated recordings of conversations, photos, audio clips, and similar items. According to witnesses, ever since Paula's mother moved in with Andreas, Paula had endured abuse from both her stepfather and her own mother. Not only did Andrina allow her daughter to be treated this way, but she herself was directly involved in it. Everyone noted that Paula seemed happy and cheerful only when she was playing alone. In the presence of her stepfather, she appeared depressed, acted shy, and became suddenly very fearful. At one point, the little girl told people she trusted that her mother and stepfather would beat her if she misbehaved. One day she even confessed that as punishment, Andreas pushed her into a wall where she hit her head. Paula referred to her stepfather as nothing less than a monster and was undoubtedly very afraid of him. She constantly had nightmares and suffered from insomnia at a young age. The couple initially preferred that the girl, who was 2 years old at the time they moved into the stepfather's home, sleep alone when falling asleep. Paula often cried, but no one paid any attention to her. Additionally, her mother and stepfather forced her to manage on her own without assistance. Moreover, her mother Andrina had been teaching her how to cook since she was 2 years old, which seemed unreasonable. Paula was compelled to prepare her own breakfast and dinners because her mother preferred to sleep in the mornings and take a break from caregiving in the evenings. She simply did not want to care for her daughter. Andrina did not mind that Paula had to handle the oven by herself despite the inherent dangers. At preschool, where Andrina had enrolled Paula, the girl frequently complained of pain in her legs and back and often mentioned she could not walk. Her constant complaints, along with the bruises on her body, prompted the teacher to show her to doctors at a health center. After an examination, they concluded that Paula was being mistreated at home. The teachers then called a special police organization to investigate the abuse within Paula's family. Officials took up the case and decided to send Paula somewhere safe while they conducted their investigation. Consequently, on October 16, 2019, Paula was temporarily transferred to her uncle's care, Andrina's brother. A hearing on the matter was set for December 4, 2019. Unfortunately, the teachers who were supposed to testify never appeared for reasons unknown. As a result, they scheduled a retrial for February 27, 2020. However, once again, all the teachers failed to attend. Consequently, the court had no option but to dismiss all charges against Paula's parents and return her to her mother. 1 month later, on March 27th, Paula passed away. The exact reasons why the teachers chose not to attend either hearing remain unknown. It is speculated that Andrina might have bribed or persuaded them that although Paula had some issues, it was not due to any wrongdoing by her parents. After Paula's tragic death, Andreas was placed in protective custody during the investigation. He soon appealed this decision, resulting in a hearing on June 12, 2020. At the hearing, which was held via video conference, the judge set an aiding order and determined Andreas could be released to house arrest. However, during the hearing, Andreas announced that he was withdrawing his appeal. At that time, Leonardo was still conducting a social media campaign and asked his subscribers for financial support to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador. His goal was to file a complaint against Andrina, Paula's mother, before it became too late. Andrina had not yet been charged and remained free. Fortunately, Leonardo managed to secure sufficient financial aid, as well as free legal advice from two Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro. They generously offered him support and assistance with the lawsuit. Leonardo faced significant challenges to reach Ecuador. He had to cross the border between Trinidad and Venezuela by rafting across dangerous waters and then travel across rugged terrain. Due to the pandemic, all regular maritime and land borders of Venezuela were closed. Thus, only a few flights were available to a handful of countries. Once Leonardo arrived in Guastulito, he crossed into Colombia over hazardous terrain. From there, he took a bus to Ipiales and continued onward through hills and plains until reaching Rumichaca Bridge, the border between Colombia and Ecuador. Upon crossing into Ecuador, Leonardo took a cab to Quito. On June 30th, he immediately met with a lawyer upon arrival. The bereaved father filed a complaint against his ex-girlfriend, so she would also be considered a suspect in Paula's murder. By July 6, 2020, an indictment was issued against Andrina. She appeared in court, where it was decided that house arrest would suffice instead of full custody. In November 2020, the initial hearing for the case took place. Although a specific trial date had not yet been determined at that time, participation and discussions were intense. Leonardo's attorney voiced concerns about Andrina's potential escape risk, and as she had previously attempted suicide using pills, the lawyer requested that Andrina be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet. The judge denied this request and also reduced her required court appearances to once a week instead of twice. However, shortly after, Andrina requested a reconsideration regarding the necessity of wearing the electronic bracelet. Consequently, another hearing was held on November 16th to review this decision. These developments inevitably caused delays in the trial proceedings, but eventually the judge set a new date for December. Despite limited media coverage of Andreas and Andrina's trial, much information found its way onto social media platforms. However, due to the pandemic dominating news coverage at the time, some details remained unreported. The trial began on January 14, 2021. At that point, no final decision had been made regarding Andrina's alternative imprisonment options, while Andreas remained detained at the Regional Detention Center. The trial was conducted behind closed doors, with no media representatives present. Some participants attended via video link to ensure proceedings continued smoothly despite restrictions. According to testimony from the doctor who performed Paula's autopsy, several disturbing findings were made. Nearly all of her spinal discs had been ruptured. She suffered broken ribs, some of which had healed naturally over time, and she displayed symptoms like nail stigmata, where nails grow into the skin, as well as bruises and scratches on her face and body. Furthermore, there was fluid accumulation in her lungs and serious injuries, such as scars on her head and lacerations on her colon. These medical findings suggested prolonged physical trauma before Paula's death and became critical evidence in understanding what transpired during her final days. The later injuries were what caused the infection to develop into sepsis, ultimately leading to death. The autopsy report confirmed that by the time Andreas took Paula to the hospital, she had been deceased for approximately 24 hours. The extent of her internal and external injuries revealed the severity of cruelty she had endured, as well as the negligence of her guardians, who never once sought medical attention for her. Additionally, Paula was malnourished, underweight, and too small for her age, with clear mineral and nutritional deficiencies. Regarding Paula's injuries, her mother, Andrina, tried to persuade family and friends that Paula had numerous psychological problems. She asserted that these issues led to self-harm behaviors which were attempts by Paula to attract attention. According to Andrina, when Paula's younger brother was born, Paula began lacking parental attention, stopped sleeping at night, and attempted to manipulate everyone through crying. In October 2019, even though Paula was supposed to stay with her uncle per a board's decision, she actually continued staying at her parents' house most of the time and only slept at her uncle's house occasionally. This indicates that measures taken by authorities did not achieve their intended outcomes. Furthermore, it was established that in 2017, shortly after Leonardo's departure from Ecuador, Paula began experiencing abuse, likely starting right after Andrina entered into a relationship with Andreas. At the trial attended by over 40 witnesses from the accusing party, it was confirmed that Paula endured abuse for at least 3 years of her short life. At the final hearing before the judge delivered the verdict, Andrina claimed full responsibility for the child's abuse. She admitted to beating Paula with a belt and sometimes using her fists. Through this statement, Andrina attempted to deflect blame away from her partner Andreas. She stated emphatically that he was innocent, that he had no involvement in the matter, and that he had never mistreated Paula. Andrina also mentioned that she had reprimanded her daughter for causing issues with her new husband. Breaking up with him meant returning to the streets and losing the financial stability she could only gain through his support. Taking care of her daughter was not her main concern. Upon reviewing Paula's circumstances, the judges expressed concern for the couple's newborn son. However, they noted that this child, unlike Paula, was never abused. It is worth mentioning that Andreas opted to exercise his right to remain silent and has not commented on the incident since his arrest. On February 3, 2021, Paula's trial concluded with both defendants being found guilty of murdering the girl. The maximum penalty for this crime is 13 years. Leonardo's original attorneys and the prosecution sought the maximum punishment for the perpetrators. However, considering an aggravating factor that Paula was just 4 years old and unable to defend herself, the chief judge sentenced Andrina and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. According to Ecuadorian law, convicted individuals have 3 days to appeal a verdict. The couple, as anticipated, indicated their intention to do so immediately. Despite being sentenced to 17 years and 4 months in prison, Andrina remained under house arrest instead of being jailed directly. She utilized her opportunity to appeal, necessitating higher court confirmation of her incarceration sentence. Meanwhile, she continues to follow the previously imposed measures. This situation is markedly different from Andreas's case. He was detained upon his appearance at the hospital with a deceased girl. Public outrage has been palpable over Andrina remaining at large. Of particular note is Leonardo's anger and concern over her potentially evading justice. 2 people that called Montana home was 21-year-old Jordan Lynn Graham and 24-year-old Cody Johnson. Cody was born in San Jose, California, and grew up with his mother Sherry after his parents divorced. Cody was her only child and the pair were extremely close. Sherry soon decided she wanted to move out of California completely, and the pair started a new life in Montana. Friends said Cody just loved to make people laugh. He was over the top and always happy to play the class clown to cheer people up. He loved everything outdoors, fishing, shooting, and taking long walks, and one of his biggest passions was doing up cars and racing them with his friends. After school, the car-loving Cody got a job making custom-built vehicles, and naturally he loved it. His boss was his close friend Cameron, and his career was flourishing. He told people that he felt something was missing. He wanted to settle down, meet someone, and raise a family in Montana. His single life would soon change when, in 2011, Cody met Jordan Graham. Jordan was quite shy, more reserved and introverted than Cody, only opening up if she was really comfortable around someone. When she did, people said she shared the same sense of humor as Cody, and the pair seemed a great match. Jordan also shared his love of the outdoors and traveling, and they spent a lot of time hiking and touring scenic routes in the area. One of the couple's favorite places to visit was the over 700 miles of trails that made up the famous Glacier National Park. Jordan also loved children, often helping to babysit her friends' kids, and she too was keen to have children of her own. Jordan came from a religious household and spoke a lot about how strict this could be. There were a lot of rules, one of which was no sex before marriage. Cody told people he was infatuated with Jordan, and before long he would be attending church with her. Friends and family said their relationship appeared to be going from strength to strength. Cody was besotted and told his mother he had found the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. So, after a year of dating, in December 2012, when Jordan made a very special announcement on social media, no one was surprised. After 6 months of planning, on June 29, 2013, Jordan and Cody were married. The wedding seemed to reflect the young couple perfectly, a magical ceremony held outdoors, with the pair even writing their own song for them to have for their first dance. Jordan sobbed uncontrollably as she walked down the aisle and wasn't really making eye contact with Cody, looking at the ground a lot instead. But for someone who was more introverted, this wasn't a surprise. Cody, however, was beaming. There were plenty of gushing speeches about the couple. It was a beautiful event for them both. After the big day was over, the couple moved into their first home and opted for doing this up and decorating with their time off, rather than traveling anywhere together for their honeymoon. Cody had booked a week off work and was due back on the 8th of July. Sunday, July 7th, 2013, Cody had made plans with his father-in-law Stephen to go kayaking that day, but he later contacted him and canceled the plans, saying Jordan had a surprise for him. Another friend of Cody's also said he had called off a round of golf for the exact same reason. Cody and Jordan then went to an afternoon church service, before going to the lake and then heading back to church. After this, they had a late dinner at Dairy Queen with some friends before leaving together. July 8th, 6 a.m. Cody's week off had come to an end and he was due to start work early, but the usually prompt and hardworking Cody failed to show up. Because of how out of character this was, Cody's boss Cameron decided to go to the couple's house and, panicked, he forced his way inside. There was no one there and there was no sign of a break-in or anything being overtly or obviously wrong. Nothing inside was broken or smashed, and nothing seemed to be missing. He then went into the garage to see if Cody's car was there. He found Cody's phone. Just the same as most people, Cody was never without his phone, and Cameron quickly filed a missing persons report. The first person detectives needed a statement from was Cody's wife. Jordan told officers that on the way back from Dairy Queen, Cody had answered the phone and ended up having a 30-minute conversation. She didn't know who was on the end of the phone, but Cody seemed visibly agitated. When they pulled up to the house, Jordan realized her phone was about to die and she had left her charger at work. She got back in the car and headed to her workplace, leaving Cody in the garage. She then got a text from Cody saying he was going to take a drive with someone. She arrived back at the house to see him leaving in a dark-colored car that had Washington state license plates. But Jordan said this wasn't unusual. As everyone knew, Cody loved cars and she said he would often take off with a new group of friends to race, sometimes very late into the evening. Jordan said she hadn't wanted to report him missing in case he came back and was angry at her for overreacting. Cody and Jordan's friends quickly rallied around and started trying to access his social media accounts, hoping to work out where he might have gone. Authorities obtained Cody's call logs and discovered that a Washington number had made a call to Cody around the time Jordan had said. Given the fact that Jordan remembered seeing Washington license plates, this was a good lead. The number was linked to a man named Jose. Jose told police he ran Cody to talk to him about some tools he had borrowed from him. There was nothing unusual about the conversation, and nothing Jose could remember as being off about Cody at the time. Jose was cleared thanks to a strong alibi, and police concluded, although strange, especially given the Washington license plates, it was simply just an odd coincidence. The search for Cody began to widen. People were out all hours of the day and night, and his friends and family were trying everything they could think of to find him. It had now been 3 days since Cody was last seen, and police weren't getting any further. Jordan was in and out of the station answering various questions which weren't being met with the same answers twice. One day, Jordan arrived back at the police station with her mother, armed with an email she had just received. The email was from someone calling themselves Carman Tony. It was short and blunt. It read, "Hi Jordan, my name is Tony. There is no bother in looking for Cody anymore. He is gone. Call off the search." The email went on to say that Cody went off with some friends for a hike that night and had fallen off the cliff. Everyone was shaken and they hoped it was either not true or If true, Cody could still be saved. Jordan said she did in fact know a Tony S. that worked with Cody. Authorities found him and asked him to come in for an interview. Tony hadn't seen or spoken to Cody in a while, and he had never used an email linked with Carmen Tony. He was happy to hand over his phone and computer records, and with this police were back at square one again. They subpoenaed Google in regards to the email, as well as Cody and Jordan's phones, to gather any data. Given the contents of the email pointing towards Cody falling off the cliff, Jordan gathered up her own search party, and they headed up into the rocky terrain of Glacier National Park. Some of the roads on the drive up were narrow, winding, and long, and given the span of the park, people knew they could be searching for weeks, if he was even there. A day later, they went back again, but this time Jordan seemed to be on a mission. They drove past many roads and cliff edges, any of which Cody could have been on or near, and carried on up, getting higher and higher. Jordan was telling people she wanted to go to a specific spot. She told her friends that it was a place he had wanted to see before he died, and the Holy Spirit was leading her there. At one point, Jordan abruptly stopped the car. She leapt out near what is called the Loop Trail. Off of the track, there was a steep drop down past many sharp rocks and trees. It was undoubtedly treacherous, as the drop was a terrifying 300 feet. Despite this, Jordan climbed over the wall and headed for the edge. She leaned over and shouted to everyone behind that she could see someone at the bottom in the water. She then started shouting over and over that she knew it was Cody. The search party alerted the park rangers, but due to the time of night and how dangerous it was to try and get down, they had to wait until morning. At 8 a.m. on July 12th, the search for Cody Johnson came to a tragic end. On the way down the cliff, using ropes tied to trees, they found a blue trainer that matched the one Cody was wearing the day he went missing. They finally reached the bottom, and, lying face down in the shallow water near the waterfall, was Cody Johnson. Near to his body was a small piece of black cloth, and he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. As news began to spread that he had been found, his friends and family couldn't fathom why on earth he would have been up there at night in the first place. His friend Eddie said even though Cody loved seeing the sights and going on long walks up there, he wouldn't have ever steered off the path and climbed over the walls in the dark. Cody wasn't actually very good with heights, he never went too high up, and always stuck to the lower-level tourist routes with retaining walls around them. Eddie said once he couldn't get up a ladder to fit a new light bulb for his mother because of the height. Shortly after Cody was found, Jordan posted a photo on Instagram from their wedding day. The caption read, "Miss you so much, Cody. Not a day will go by where I don't think about you. You will live on in my heart forever. I know you're in a better place now looking down on me. You're my angel. Love you with all my heart and soul. See you again one day." It had now been 2 weeks and police were still searching for answers regarding the mystery email. While they did this, Cody was laid to rest. At his funeral, Jordan sat through most of it on her phone, showing no emotion. It could have been her way of processing and compartmentalizing the situation, but her maid of honor and best friend, Kimberly, thought this was just too strange. After this, Kimberly promptly walked into the police station and started to shine a whole new light on the investigation. She asked to talk to officers about some interesting texts she had gotten off of Jordan in the weeks leading up to and just after the wedding. Despite their perfect nuptials, she recalled many a conversation with Jordan about how she seemed far more excited about planning the wedding rather than the thought of being married to Cody, more excited to be a bride than a wife. Others said that Cody, put simply, was always far more in love with Jordan than she ever was with him. Kimberly recounted a couple of times Jordan had asked her if she thought she was making the right decision. Other people would back this up and say Jordan was very nervous about the wedding night and wondered if she was making a mistake in committing to Cody. The night after the wedding, Jordan texts Kimberly saying, "I don't know if all this was the right thing to do. So much happened last night. I just don't know." Kimberly replied, "Last night at the wedding or last night in the room?" Jordan said, "Being married and after the wedding." "What happened after?" Kimberly asked. "I'd rather talk about what happened, not text about it." But as the days progressed, the texts continued. "Using the My Period Started spiel tonight, I freaking hope it works, because if I'm forced to do something, I'm gonna freak out." On the night of July 7th, as the pair were leaving Dairy Queen after dinner, Kimberly received another text from Jordan, this time saying she wanted to talk to Cody about how she was really feeling. Kimberly said she would send positivity and prayers to them both, and just before 9 p.m., replied and said, "But dead serious, if you don't hear from me at all again tonight, something happened." Later that night, Jordan would turn up on Kimberly's doorstep, telling her the conversation hadn't gone down well. She said Cody got really angry, and she ended up leaving the house to go to her brother's. This, along with her seemingly knowing exactly where to find Cody, and the comments she had made about him wanting to see that place before he died, as well as her not being the one to report him missing, was all too odd. Kimberly said it was a sickening feeling, but she knew in her gut that Jordan was somehow responsible for Cody's death. She just didn't know how or why. Detectives already had their suspicions, given how many times her stories had changed. And Kimberly's brief of text messages only solidified their thoughts. After this, the IP address from the email came back. It actually pointed towards the email being set up and used in her stepfather's home, and despite Jordan saying they were both separate the night as he had driven off, phone records confirmed this was a lie. Both phones were together in Glacier National Park at 9:17 p.m. Using this time frame, they managed to gather CCTV to the entrance of the park, which showed Cody's car and both of them inside. Police were no longer looking at the elusive car man Tony, they were now looking straight at Jordan Graham. Jordan was asked to come into the station and tell them the full truth about what had happened that night. She eventually broke down and told them she had started to talk to Cody about how she felt, and it escalated into an argument. Cody said if this was how she felt, they should annul the marriage. Jordan, however, was worried about her reputation if they divorced a mere 8 days after the wedding. How and why this came to be remains unclear, but they both got in the car and drove to the park where they set off on a trail. At one point, Jordan even mentioned a blindfold. She said they both walked over a bridge and then climbed over the retaining wall where the argument continued. Despite her claiming it to be in the heat of the moment and, essentially, an accident, officers weren't convinced. Why wouldn't she have run for help, rather than running to her stepfather's computer to fake an email? Why would Cody have climbed over the edge in the first place when he was afraid of going near the cliff edge? Even for someone that wasn't afraid of heights, to go over a safety wall in the pitch black above a 300-foot drop wearing a blindfold seems an inconceivable thought. Jordan Lynn Graham was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and making false statements. But this was soon upped. As the trial began, her defense team went straight in, fighting for a second-degree murder conviction, claiming it was an accident in the midst of a heated argument. But the prosecution felt strongly that this was far more than an accident. They said the fact she had told him she had a surprise for him, and he was found near something that may have been used as a blindfold, showed this was very much premeditated. This, along with the phone records, the fake email, the failure to alert anyone or report him missing, and the lack of emotion after the fact added more to their case that she didn't care about what she had done, had planned it, and hoped to pin it on someone else. On December 12, 2013, just 4 days after her trial began, Jordan's defense team made an announcement. Jordan Graham's plea deal gave her 30 years in federal prison, with no chance of parole any earlier. In exchange for her plea, prosecutors agreed to drop the charge of premeditated first-degree murder, as well as one count of making a false statement to authorities. After her sentencing, the judge said, "There's only one person in this room that knows what happened, and I don't think she's been entirely truthful." Jordan filed a motion to withdraw her plea on March 26, 2014, but this motion was denied. For those that Cody left behind, they still struggle with how on earth things got to such a point. They say as broken-hearted as he would have been to end the marriage, he would have absolutely walked away if it meant she was happy, because her being happy was the most important thing to him. His affectionate, animated, and vivacious personality is missed dearly by everyone that knew and loved him. For Sherry, the pain of losing her only child and still never knowing why haunts her. Cody's best friend said, "He did so much for everybody. I just didn't realize how much he did for me until he was gone." Garbage collector was paralyzed on January 22, 2023, after sifting through a trash container near the Columbia Park to find what was at the bottom of it. A blue suitcase was inside, sealed with black tape, and surrounded by several garbage bags. The suitcase contained a woman's body, which was easily identified because her head was visible from the suitcase. The worker was frightened upon finding something, so he drove several blocks and reported it to the police. The Capitol Police promptly dispatched a team of officers to investigate. Can you provide some examples? The police officers who arrived were met with a horrifying scene. The corpse was cradled in the suitcase and taken away. Valentina Tres Palacios was identified as the victim a few hours later. At the outset, the body was found to be free from any indications of violence, firearms, or knives, and it was not dismembered. Can you provide some examples? After opening the suitcase, detectives discovered that the woman was wearing pajamas with a belt, suggesting that she had been attacked while sleeping by the person who killed her. A black cardboard box on the side of the suitcase contained items that helped identify the body. Police found a student ID, password used by the victim when applying for a certificate, as well as some documents and personal belongings among them. The investigating team found it peculiar, as the presence of documents in such cases was not typical. Can you provide some examples? The police contacted the woman's family after finding the suitcase with her body, and they confirmed that she was with friends on Saturday, January 21st. The woman was found to have been struck multiple times in the head during the forensic examination. Her body was found with multiple injuries, including bleeding from the right part of her tongue and 5 cuts around her neck that indicated strangulation. Valentina Tres Palacios was born on December 16, 2001 in Bogota, Colombia. She was enrolled in the Faculty of Commerce and International Business. The girl was a music enthusiast from an early age. After completing her professional DJ diploma, she was granted access to work as a DJ in Colombia due to her exceptional talent and musical sense. She had a career that began 3 years ago and resulted in many foreign friends. Valentina traveled to other countries where she typically gained knowledge or exhibited her accomplishments. She had the chance to perform alongside some of the most renowned musicians during this period. She toured over 20 cities in the country and was present at significant international events of this kind. Her past activities involved performing at festivals and touring throughout Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. People in her vicinity claimed that she had a bright future ahead. She was sought after and traveled throughout the nation. She dominated the best nightclubs and pursued her passion. Valentina was a very happy, smiling young girl who enjoyed the party. She maintained social media accounts where she shared her stage performances and always kept her followers informed about her daily routine. Can you provide some examples? In the electronic music industry of Colombia, she was recently recognized as the best amateur DJ. The girl shared about 2 things on her social media: her rising popularity in the electronic music industry at nightclubs and her relationship with an American named John Poulos, whom she met online by the end of 2021. John and Valentina's communication skills improved as time passed. Valentina's initial desire for stability and commitment was not strong, but her relationship with him transformed into a romantic partnership that the young people eventually shared. John Poulos was a resident of America. Valentina was so invested in her life that he sent her money to attend the cosmetic course that involved injecting her lips with hyaluronic acid. The procedure was repeated to improve her cheekbones, and John also suggested surgery and silicone breast implants for his partner, modifying her appearance within a few months and becoming the talk of the town. He started sending money to the girl on a regular basis, and eventually came up with the idea of marrying her. Originally, Poulos had plans to move to Colombia and live with Valentina, but she was skeptical because this person was so envious that he hired a private detective to track all her contacts and activities. Valentina's family was highly suspicious as she expressed her concern about this situation. John Poulos was prepared to spend the rest of his life with his partner by January 2023. He was committed to marrying Valentina and initiated the process of organizing the necessary paperwork. He rented an apartment in the northern area of Bogota, where he planned to spend the weekends with the girl until they found a permanent place to live. On Thursday, January 19th, Poulos arrived in Bogota. Around 8:53 p.m., he was caught on surveillance footage entering the building's apartment. Along with him, there was a blue suitcase that bore resemblance to the one used to find Valentina's corpse. John Poulos was the first person to be noticed after the disturbing discovery, as he was also the last one to have seen Valentina alive. The detectives' attempt to reach him resulted in the call being diverted to voicemail. Valentina's family members found Poulos to be a kind and collected individual. His demeanor was undeniable, and his plans to marry the young woman were evident. They were unable to fathom his involvement in this terrible crime, but these doubts were eliminated when investigators arrived at the apartment rental building, where it was discovered that the man had already left and was not found. On Monday, January 23rd, John Poulos took down his social media profiles in the early morning following Valentina's death. He was the sole suspect at that point. The revelation was made evident when investigators analyzed the surveillance camera footage in the building. From Friday evening to early Sunday morning, the Colombian Police and Prosecutor's Office examined hours of video footage from cameras in the areas where the young woman and her boyfriend were. The trash container was where the body was disposed of at this point. The footage and numerous WhatsApp conversations were instrumental in uncovering the girl's final hours. On January 20th, Valentina and Poulos made a deal to meet. Can you provide some examples? The man arrived on the 19th, the day before, and took up residence in the apartment where the couple had planned to live. After he texted Valentina, they started arguing on the same night because she was at a party with her friend and didn't anticipate him coming over. He inquired about the presence of significant individuals at the gathering and whether she was with any male. She wryly replied with a no reply, stating that it was his suspicions, and they had agreed to meet on the 20th. Prior to meeting John, Valentina had planned to visit various locations to care for herself, apply her lash extensions, and attend hair salons. On January 20th, the couple were unable to see each other due to their disagreement, and only in the evening, when Valentina's apartment was being monitored by surveillance cameras. Did they know exactly when they were in that parking lot? The girls' possessions were being packed by John at 6 p.m. as the two of them moved to another apartment and began a new life. Valentina's journey across the country was marked by a series of emotional goodbyes, one of which was with her family and friends. She made a video call to her mother saying that she was going home. The video depicts the girl accompanied by Poulos, who hired a vehicle to transport Valentina's possessions. They were caught on surveillance footage entering the apartment with their possessions at 7 p.m. Valentina sent her mother a series of videos showing the apartment in their frequent exchanges to get things. The cameras captured them completing the move and engaging in other activities before heading back to their new home. It was Saturday, January 21st at 1 a.m. Around 3 a.m., the couple arranged a taxi to go to southeastern New York's nightclub, where Valentina was set to perform 2 hours later. Can you provide some examples? The club was reached by them at approximately 4 a.m. Valentina commenced work almost immediately. While she was busy, John Poulos remained with her. Can you provide some examples? At approximately 5 a.m., her performance concluded. Valentina and John, holding hands, headed to the nightclub's office. They encountered the proprietor of the establishment, his spouse, and her companion. Valentina's friends had not seen her since they left the venue at 6 a.m. Her smile was back on her face, shining brightly, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Valentina contacted her friend on the phone and stated that she had no intention of going anywhere on Saturday. She stated that she would probably stay in the apartment with her partner. Later on, they might go out to eat or cook together at their house. The last time Valentina spoke to her friend was at 9 p.m., and it was through video. Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, revealed that her 13-year-old son was the final individual to converse with her on video. The girl was in bed with John. They both appeared to be in a state of happiness. The family had no further information about them. On January 21st, at 10:43 p.m., surveillance cameras in the building captured the young woman and her boyfriend. In the video, Valentina can be seen peering out of the apartment door while John stands in front of it. He seems contemplative and a little menacing, pacing back and forth, occasionally grimacing his face. He orders the elevator to go down and retrieve a delivery. Poulos was captured by the cameras again on Sunday, January 22nd at 9 a.m. He exits the room with 2 bags of garbage. Valentina was nowhere to be found on this occasion. The man drives to the parking area, takes a silver car, and places the bags in the back seat. Following that, he goes back to the apartment and retrieves 2 suitcases from the trunk. Subsequently, he heads back to the apartment. A gray blanket covers the suitcase that Poulos removed from the apartment where the Clark reads 10 a.m. He put it into a cart for shipping. A second bag was situated beside it. Valentina's head was wrapped in the blanket. The man surveys the parking area after parking. He perceives that nobody is in the vicinity. Moving ahead, he looks over to make sure nobody is going down in the elevator. Subsequently, he rapidly makes his way back to the vehicle. He glances at the mirror one last time and takes a sip of water before struggling to lift the heavy suitcase, which he puts in the trunk. The bag is the next item on the list. Subsequently, he takes control of the vehicle and departs. Surveillance cameras caught the car at different locations throughout the city around noon. It was evident that the subject was in search of a suitable spot to leave the suitcase. The car entered one of the parks and parked near the garbage containers at approximately 3 p.m. The driver exited and headed towards the container at that juncture. He surveyed the area, verified that no one was watching, and then removed the suitcase, which seemed excessive. Before tossing it into the container, he went back to the car and removed the bag, which he then placed in the trash bin, closed the lid, and exited. The vehicle was traveling westward until it reached El Dorado International Airport. John's last known whereabouts were at the airport at 4:30 p.m. A $1 million reward was announced by the Ministry of Security on Monday, January 23rd, for any information that could lead to the arrest of the person or persons responsible for the murder of Valentina Tres Palacios. The Colombian authorities enlisted the help of Interpol to issue an arrest warrant as Poulos fled the country's border without indicating why. Additionally, he was the final person to witness the girl's existence. Can you provide some examples? On January 24th, the National Police of Panama stated that they had apprehended Poulos at El Dorado International Airport while he was traveling to Turkey. In an effort to obtain answers about Valentina's death, Colombian authorities quickly began the process of deporting him to the country. Over 14 criminal investigation specialists contributed to the investigation, collecting evidence to establish the facts. The analysis of over 300 hours of video footage from cameras was the outcome of methodological work carried out in partnership with the country's prosecutor office. The case yielded another crucial finding after the arrest of this individual. Valentina's mobile phone was discovered near the El Dorado International Airport by a security staff member. He stumbled upon a mobile phone on the grass while walking near a 1/10 gas station and picked it up. The man brought the discovered gadget home after he realized that it did not have a SIM card. He took the phone to sell it, unaware that it belonged to Valentina. The security guard's wife called him hours later in despair when she realized that the photo of the girl in the wallpaper on the mobile phone were identical to those seen on social media and also for the young woman found dead in the trash container. Unfortunately, the phone had already been marked for sale and repackaged because someone was willing to buy it. Therefore, information that could have been advantageous in this situation went unguarded. Can you provide some examples? Following that, the driver of the car that the couple had driven to the nightclub gave his testimony, which was followed by a big question. The driver was tasked with transporting the couple to a nightclub located in the southern part of the city. Before getting into the car, Poulos paused for a moment before Valentina exited. She got into the car and screamed that she had written something untoward. The driver looked at her in disbelief before checking his phone and finding out that Tres Palacios had sent him a message to customer care, warning him in Spanish that he was in danger. The driver looked at the girl and inquired if she was all right, but her response was uncertain as Poulos entered the car and asked. She said, "Are you okay?" John and Valentina conversed in English as the car was being driven, and the man asked if they were bilingual, to which he replied with a positive answer. Poulos remained silent and instead corresponded with Valentina on WhatsApp. Upon leaving about 4 a.m., the driver went to the nightclub with the couple and then forgot about the incident until he was informed of the young woman's death several days later. Due to Valentina's open WhatsApp session, her friend who lived in Cartagena came to the prosecutor office in Bogota and surrendered their computer with the chats providing clues about what had occurred. One of the pieces of evidence found in Valentina's chat was that her friend had spotted a suitcase with her body, which was said to have been there. The friend said that on the same day Valentina was in Bogota, she got a text from Pulas and received several selfies with his luggage. The suitcase that John brought with him was akin to the one found by authorities in the container. The color was indistinguishable. There's no clear answer as to why the young girl left her WhatsApp session open on her friend's computer. But all of these texts helped authorities get what happened that night when Valentina was killed. It was determined by forensic investigators that she died from asphyxiation caused by tightly strangled with a rope. Prior to her passing, there were indications on her body that she had been a victim of violence. All indications from the forensic examination indicate that Valentina Tres Palacios passed away while sleeping. This conclusion was drawn up by criminalists because she was wearing pajamas. There was no doubt in the evidence above that John Pulas was present. The indictment stated that the suspect did not acknowledge responsibility for the girl's death, citing the current situation and the concealment of evidence. Rather, he said, "There were violations when I was arrested in Panama because we did not have a lawyer to talk to." Pulos' Spanish language skills were not strong enough to warrant a translator, and the hearing lasted for more than 5 hours. The crime committed by Pulos is attributed to his involvement with Valentina, and he attempted to disappear without trace, erasing his social media accounts after the incident. On May 19, 1987, John Pulos was born in Wisconsin, United States. He had 3 children and was previously wedded in his native land. His criminal record included charges of violence against women, including obtaining a restraining order against his ex-wife. The use of pornographic websites was reported by a woman to whom John Pulos had sent money who claimed that this person was actively browsing. According to her, he spent approximately 5-6 hours daily on the site, and she mentioned that despite being a man, his behavior was often bizarre in nature, such as fantasizing and recounting ghost stories. Another model who testified on a modeling page said she knew the American from Texas, America. She ceased writing to him after a peculiar comment he made, which included the words jealousy and death. John's question was, "If I were at a bar, would you be willing to talk to me?" The girl refused in response. "It's likely that one of us will die due to jealousy," replied Pulos. The witness stated that despite the subject having sent money to the magical lord, she never conversed with him on video because his communication was often unusual. It is important to acknowledge that John had certain conduct towards his victims. He contacted Valentine on social media and started sending her money with persistence and consistency in the case. This approach to women's treatment as property was a warning sign that the trusting women initially neglected, and Pulos believed he could purchase them with money from the outset. The factors were disregarded, leading to the possibility that the victim unintentionally stumbled into her abuser's trap and was eventually recognized due to his own mistake. The authorities involved in this case are assuming that John thought the waste disposal system in Colombia was equivalent to that in the United States, where he resided. According to him, the waste material had settled in the container and would eventually be disposed of. Pulos did not assume that recycling workers and street dwellers frequently sift through garbage to discover items that can be sold or employed as something. John Pulos is being held in a private cell in Bogota today. Now all that remains is to demonstrate that all these pieces of evidence connect the individual to the crime and to discover the motive behind this dreadful murder. In Colombia, the criminal code provides for a prison sentence of up to 50 years for a crime in which an American is accused. With the assistance of a special group formed by the Capitol Police in coordination with the country's Attorney General's office, criminal investigators will be engaged in the search for material evidence to clarify this fact. Such cases once again demonstrate to us how dangerous social networks can be when getting to know someone. Valentina thought she had found love and someone with whom she would spend the rest of her days. However, this did not happen, and like many people in the world, she too thought that nothing like this would happen to her. Everyone said that Jerry Michael Williams had it all. Known to everyone as Mike, he had a beautiful family whom he adored, a well-paying career in real estate which provided them a lovely home and a great circle of friends. He came from humble beginnings. His father was a bus driver and his mother worked as a daycare provider. The family lived in a trailer, so his parents saved up all their money to send Mike and his brother Nick to get a good education at North Florida Christian High School. Mike excelled in school, and alongside his studies, he started working night shifts in a convenience store to help support his parents. His friends said, everyone just liked him because he was just a very genuine soul. It wasn't unlike Mike to step into the role of protective older brother. If he thought anyone was picking on you, he would stick up for you. He was always there to protect me. It wasn't long before the teenage Mike met fellow student Denise Merrill. Mike was playing football and Denise was a cheerleader. They also worked on the school council together. Around this time, he also met Brian Winchester, who fast became his best friend. Along with Brian's girlfriend Kathy, and the couples were very close. During his school years, Mike discovered what would become a lifelong hobby for him, duck hunting. His mother Cheryl said Mike had loved the outdoors and helping his dad hunt since he was about 6 years old. Mike, Denise, Brian, and Kathy all graduated in 1988, and both couples ended up marrying in 1994, still very close. Denise became an accountant, Mike went to work in real estate, and Brian went into selling insurance policies. Never one to shy away from hard work, this trait followed him into adulthood. He rarely took days off and worked 14 to 16-hour days, starting his day in the office before dawn, and sometimes only returning to the family home to eat dinner before heading back to work. His boss said he was the hardest working man he had ever known, and at one point had to take his keys to the building away, so he physically couldn't come into work over the weekend. In 1999, Denise and Mike had a little girl called Ansley, and the family were living in a small but upscale and affluent neighborhood. Mike's dad sadly passed away, which had a profound impact on him and made his relationship with his little girl feel even more precious. After this, the couple took out a $1.5 million life insurance policy on Mike, sold to them by Brian. Another 2 policies were taken out, and the total reached almost $2 million. Mike said after what had happened to his father, he wanted to make sure that if the worst happened, his family were well taken care of. Thursday, December 14th, 2000, Mike had been spending a lot of time with his mother, helping support her after the loss of his father. He and Denise told Cheryl and his brother Nick that they were hoping to have another baby very soon. Mike couldn't wait to give Ansley a sibling, and having a big family was something he had dreamed of. The couple were also planning a cruise and looking forward to celebrating their 6-year wedding anniversary in a couple of days. Saturday, December 16th, 2000. Just before dawn, Mike packed up his hunting gear, attached his boat to his truck, and set off for Lake Seminole, about an hour's drive away. An early morning drive he made most mornings to a spot he loved to duck hunt on. Around noon, Denise called her father. Mike was still not home. Today was the couple's 6th wedding anniversary, and they'd made big plans to celebrate, so why he hadn't come home was a mystery. Brian Winchester and Denise's father drove down to the lake. Lake Seminole is about 35 miles long, but Mike would only visit certain spots, and Brian said they should start with these. 12 hours later, at 2:30 a.m., they found Mike's Ford Bronco near a remote boat launch. After this, they discovered his boat in the dark, swampy, shallow water. Inside was his shotgun and 2 life jackets. The engine wasn't running, but the boat was still full of gas, and Mike was nowhere. A helicopter was deployed and divers started looking into the water. Sadly, the search was hindered due to the stormy weather and freezing temperatures. After a few days, it was becoming clear that the chances of Mike being found alive was unlikely. Authorities felt strongly that this was simply a tragic boating accident. Mike's boat had probably hit a stump and he had fallen into the water and drowned as his waders filled up with water. And the reason they couldn't find his body was because he was likely eaten by alligators. A theory his friend Brian Winchester, who often hunted with him, said he sadly agreed with. Cheryl, however, did not agree. She reached out to an expert to ask about the alligator theory, and the expert said alligators tended to stop eating if the temperature in the water drops below a certain point, and if they had eaten him, the chances of him being eaten whole with no trace of him or his clothing was virtually impossible. 700 man-hours over 44 days were spent on the searches, but there was simply nothing there, no clues, no leads, no evidence to be found, and the search was finally called off. 6 months after he was last seen, Everything would change when a hat was found floating in the water, followed by a pair of waders. This led to the discovery of a flashlight, red jacket, and Mike Williams' hunting license. These items appeared to have no damage to them, something they were expecting to see if an alligator had attacked Mike. They were so unaffected by the elements. His license was still legible and his flashlight still worked, which made no sense given the fact they would have been in the swampy water for 6 months. Everyone was shocked that after all the hours and days of searching, this seemingly had been under their noses the whole time. Officer David Arnett admitted it looked unusual and out of place right off the bat. He noted that Mike's truck was found at an undeveloped landing, which meant he would have had to drag his boat through the mud to get to the lake, and the bad storm should have blown his boat to the eastern shore, but it was found on the western shore. In Florida, when someone is missing, you normally have to wait 5 years before they can legally be declared dead. But just 6 months after he was last seen, Denise requested a death certificate for her husband. And with this, Mike Williams was declared dead, with accidental drowning listed as the cause. Cheryl had no idea this was the case and refused to believe it was. But Denise M. was having none of it. According to Cheryl, Denise told her that if she did anything to open a criminal investigation, she would lose any access to her granddaughter. According to those close to the Williams family, Denise quickly distanced herself from her in-laws and cut off communication between them and her daughter. But Denise's friends say she took actually a lot of time to talk to her daughter about her father and what a great man he was. For someone who had already lost her husband and son, the thought of losing her granddaughter was too painful, but she needed answers and decided to carry on, resulting in Mike's case being reopened. In 2005, everyone in the community and those who had been following the case since the start started talking. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester got married. Needless to say, most were a little shocked. Some, however, had been hearing rumors of an affair between the pair for years, and Brian's divorce from Kathy and subsequent proposal to Denise had come as no surprise to them. Brian's ex-wife Kathy corroborated the affair allegations, saying she knew something was going on between her ex-husband and Denise for years. A year later, Mike's case would hit the media once again. Jennifer Portman, the news director of the Tallahassee Democrat, saw an article sent in by Cheryl. After reading it, she knew the story didn't add up, and his story needed more attention. She began running many a story on Mike, documenting everything, hoping to put his case back on the map. In 2008, law enforcement announced they had started looking into this as being a case of foul play. As the years continued to tick by and with Mike still missing, Cheryl was working hard too. In 2011, she held a vigil for her son. It was just her carrying a couple of signs, walking up and down the street for Mike. Little did anyone know, the police were gathering evidence and investigating Brian and Denise for potential insurance fraud. This was based on Mike's life insurance policies, were collected by the pair of them after he was declared dead. Someone else had come forward during this time and said they actually saw Brian at Lake Seminole that morning, and when he was shown a lineup of people, he pointed to Brian and said, "Well, he wasn't smiling like that, but that's definitely him." As the investigation into the insurance continued, Denise and Brian Winchester's marriage started to fall apart. The couple separated in 2012, before divorcing in 2016. The splits had very quickly turned sour, and this would spark a change in Brian. He broke into the back of Denise's car, and when she got in, he held her at gunpoint. As soon as he jumped out of the car, she went straight to the police and reported him for armed kidnap. As the interview progressed, the officer saw the issues between the couple, and to use this as a way to bring up Mike's case. The reason Brian got into the car and the conversation he'd had with her that day would soon come to light, and after 16 years of silence, the truth about what had happened to Mike would finally start to come out. As Brian was set to go to trial, he was offered a deal. If he knew anything about Mike, tell the truth and gain immunity in his case. In exchange, he would have his sentence reduced to 20 years in prison. He accepted the deal, and finally he started talking. Brian admitted that the affair began in 1997, and as the years had passed, a plan was hatched to kill Mike, stage his death as an accident, take the insurance money, and, in his words, live happily ever after. Her daughter was getting older, and if something were to happen to Mike, she wanted her to be young enough so she wouldn't remember, Brian said. He said he'd been manipulated in ways he didn't realize, stating he was a stupid 30-year-old. The pair first chose the date of December 9th, 2000 as the day for Mike to be killed. Brian would take him on a duck hunting trip, knock him overboard, and pretend it was an accident. But on the morning of the 9th, Denise phoned Brian, saying they shouldn't go ahead with it. She was having second thoughts. Brian said he was relieved, but also confused. After this, he claimed Denise changed her mind again and December 16th was set as the day. After this, Brian dragged Mike's body to the shoreline and put him in the back of his car, before pushing the boat back out onto the water. He then drove back home and got into bed with his wife Kathy, who was still asleep. Later, he drove to a Walmart. He bought a shovel. He then drove to a remote area and buried Mike. Brian said that over the years, Denise spoke little of Mike, almost pretending it didn't happen and denying any part in it. As Brian and Denise's relationship began to go south, Brian became paranoid, and the fear of Denise turning him into the authorities was at the forefront of his mind all the time. When he held her at gunpoint in the car that day, said he had made her swear to never tell anyone about Mike and take their secret to the grave. A day after his confession, he told police where they could find Mike's remains, at the end of Gardner Road in northern Lyon County. It was desolate, remote, quiet, and just 5 miles from where Mike had grown up. 5 months later, authorities arrived at Denise Winchester's office, and she was placed under arrest. This fell on Ansley's 19th birthday. Denise was indicted on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and accessory after the fact. Her legal team said that Brian was nothing more than a jilted ex-husband, and because of the plea deal, he could essentially make up anything he wanted and get away with it. Brian, Cheryl, and Brian's ex-wife Kathy all testified. After 3 days of evidence, it was down. The jury, her team, quickly lodged an appeal. The judges agreed with Denise's lawyers, and in 2020, they overturned the murder conviction. They said the prosecution failed to show she was a principal to the crime. However, the conspiracy to commit murder conviction was upheld, and she was resentenced. She gave a statement herself, as did Cheryl. Denise was resentenced to 30 years, and will have to serve 85% of that sentence before she is eligible for parole. Brian is eligible for parole in 2034, and he will be 63 years old. Her funeral could finally be held for Mike, and Cheryl said she wanted everyone to be there, even extending the welcome to family and friends of both Denise and Brian. Cheryl said every year for her granddaughter's birthday, despite not getting a response, she takes out a little ad in the paper for her, hoping she'll see it and reach out. As well as losing her father at just 18 months old, Ansley has essentially lost her mother too. She believes in her mother's innocence and said, "There's no way my mother would conspire to kill my father with Brian. She could not bring herself to do that. He acted independently of her." Cheryl Williams is a remarkable woman who was relentless in her search for answers for her son. She has compiled 27 pages of notes and evidence and written to the governor of Florida every single day for 9 years. She vowed to never give up until someone took her seriously. Mike Williams was a kind, hard-working man who everyone said put his family on a pedestal. His life came to a terrible and terrifying end, and it took almost 20 years to get justice, but his family made sure it happened for him. In the quiet, mundane life sometimes lie the most extraordinary and harrowing stories. The name of Velma Barfield forever changed the narrative of crime and punishment in the United States. Her life story reads like a tragedy that challenges our perception of evil. Known to many as the death row grandma, she became the first woman executed by lethal injection in the United States, the first woman to be executed after the death penalty's reinstatement in 1976, and also the first woman executed since 1962. But how did a wife, mother, and grandmother, once cherished and loved by those who knew her, transform into one of the most notorious figures in criminal history? Born in a time of economic despair, in the shadow of the Great Depression, Velma Margie Barfield came into the world on October 29, 1932, in Eastover, North Carolina, but was raised near Fayetteville. The second of 9 children, she witnessed a constant battle against poverty from the early age. In rural North Carolina, where life was governed by the rising and setting of the sun, Velma's family toiled on their small tobacco and cotton farm. Velma's father, Murphy Bullard, was a man worn down by the hardships of farm life. His temper was as volatile as the weather that dictated their fortunes. Velma claimed he was physically and sexually abusive to her and her sisters. However, other relatives disputed this. Velma's mother, Lily Bullard, bore the brunt of her husband's frustrations. In their world, love was a luxury they could hardly afford, leaving Velma and her siblings to navigate a childhood marked by emotional absence and the ever-present threat of violence. At a young age, Velma observed the financial differences between herself and her peers. That's when her first criminal activity started. She initially took small amounts of cash from her father to buy little things that she saw her classmates enjoying. Her petty thefts escalated to taking $80 from an elderly neighbor. When her father discovered that, he beat her severely, and Velma stopped stealing for the remainder of her childhood. Raised in a Christian household, young Velma found solace in the pages of her Bible, clinging to faith in the turmoil of her home life. This early introduction to religion was a constant amidst chaos. Yet, as she transitioned to adolescence, the psychological scars left by her upbringing would shape the woman she would later become. The world around was convulsed by World War II. The war, though distant, exacerbated the hardships faced by her family and deepened the fractures within. Velma, like many of her generation, was forced to grow up quickly. Her dreams and aspirations were often overshadowed by depressing needs of survival and duty to family. Yet it was during this time that her resilience and tenacity began to shine through, qualities that would define her in both commendable and tragic ways. As Velma stepped into early adulthood, her desire for a life beyond the confines of her home grew stronger. She dreamed of escape. At the age of 17, she dropped out of school. The search for love and stability led Velma into the arms of Thomas Burke, a union that promised freedom, but instead brought new hardships. By 19, she had 2 children, a son, Ron, and a daughter, Kim. The family lived happily in Parkton, North Carolina for over 15 years. Velma's life with Thomas seemed a hard-earned escape from the poverty and violence of her childhood. Everything changed in 1965, when Thomas got into a serious car crash and suffered head injuries. To cope with the intense pain and headaches caused by his injuries, he became a heavy drinker and drug user. His struggle with alcohol mirrored the demons of Velma's father, reigniting the traumas of her past. The cycle of abuse and neglect she vowed never to repeat began to encroach upon her own family. It was during these turbulent years that Velma's resilience was put to the ultimate test. The pressures of an unhappy marriage, the responsibilities of motherhood, and the patterns of her past weighed heavily on her soul. Velma started a job at a textile factory, but soon had to quit due to health problems. She underwent an urgent hysterectomy, which left her feeling insecure about her femininity. After the surgery, she suffered from debilitating back pain and turned to prescription drugs. What began as a means to cope soon spiraled into addiction that eroded her judgment and set the stage for the tragedies to come. Her journey was not a plunge, but a gradual descent, each step marked by an increasing desperation to maintain the illusion of control. On April 4, 1969, Velma had a fierce argument with her husband. Later that day, when she and the children were away, the house caught fire. Thomas, who remained inside, died from smoke inhalation, and the house was burned to the ground. Velma and the kids moved in with her parents. A few months after her husband's death, Velma started dating a widower, Jennings Barfield. They married in August 1970. One day, the couple had an argument, after which Jennings became mysteriously ill. On March 21, 1971, he died of a heart attack. Velma moved into her parents' home again. Soon after that, her father died of lung cancer. In the summer of 1974, her mother suffered severe stomach pain and was taken to the hospital. As she got better, she returned home. In August 1974, a man Velma was dating died in a car accident. On December 30th of the same year, her mother was taken to the hospital again with similar symptoms of a severe stomach illness. Doctors couldn't help her this time, nor could they diagnose her illness, and she died after 2 hours. No autopsy was performed. As mysterious deaths around Velma continued, her son Ronnie Burke said, "It's the saddest thing, but it seems like everybody my mother ever gets close to dies. How could the good Lord allow this to happen to a faithful Christian like Velma Barfield?" The financial strain of her addiction led to another unethical decision, forging checks to sustain her growing needs. But deceit has its price, and the trust within the community began to fray. Velma found herself trapped in a web of her own making. In 1975, she was convicted of 7 counts of writing bad checks and sentenced to 6 months in prison. However, she was released after serving 3 months. Upon her release in 1976, Velma took a job as a caretaker for the elderly. Initially, she worked for 94-year-old Montgomery Edwards and his 84-year-old wife, Dolly, in Lumberton, North Carolina. Montgomery fell ill and died on January 29, 1977. A few weeks later, in February, Dolly developed symptoms of a stomach illness similar to those of Velma's mother and died on March 1st. Velma then started looking after 76-year-old Record Lee, who had broken her leg. On June 4, 1977, Lee's husband, John Henry, began to suffer severe pains in his stomach and chest. Doctors diagnosed his condition as a severe stomach virus. He died later that month. Later in 1977, Velma moved in with her boyfriend, Roland Stewart Taylor, a relative of Dolly Edwards. He was a widower and tobacco farmer. One day, they were attending a Pentecostal revival meeting in Cumberland County. Suddenly, Stewart complained of severe stomach pain. He was taken to the hospital where he died after a few days. The search for truth begins in the quietest of ways. A question, a doubt, a pressing need for answers. Suspicion grew in the hearts of those who had watched Stewart's health decline under mysterious circumstances. It was their persistence that first brought the authorities to Velma's doorstep, initiating a chain of events that would lead to shocking revelations. An autopsy was ordered. The investigation into Stewart Taylor's death was methodical. Each test, each interview, each piece of evidence added another layer of suspicion around Velma. In the world of criminal investigations, breakthroughs often come with a faint clue, a moment of intuition, a connection previously unseen. For the team pursuing justice for Stewart Taylor and the other victims, it came in the form of forensic evidence. Arsenic became the linchpin in unraveling the mystery, traces of which were found in Stewart's system. Before the autopsy results were declared, Lumberton police received an anonymous phone call, reportedly from Velma's sister, who said that Velma had poisoned Taylor and others. Subsequently, Velma was arrested on charges of murdering Stewart Taylor. After her arrest, the body of Jennings Barfield was exhumed and traces of arsenic were found. The unraveling of Velma's carefully constructed lies began. The art of interrogation is delicate, a push and pull between investigator and suspect. Each question a probe into the darkest corners of the human heart. For Velma, questions posed by her interrogators mirrored the ones she had long avoided within herself. It was in this room, under the weight of evidence and the scrutiny of the law, that the wall she had built to separate her actions from her conscience could no longer hold as the truth clawed its way to the surface. In search of solace, Velma turned to a spiritual advisor. It was in this desperate hope for redemption that she found the strength to confront her past. For her, the path to confession was a journey back to her soul. With a voice tinged with regret, Velma began to speak. A torrent of truths, long dammed by fear, shame, and denial, flowed forth. Her confession became a source of deep, lasting pain for her own family, who were unwittingly caught in her web of deceit. The woman they loved and the horrible crimes she committed were now inseparably linked, challenging their notions of forgiveness, and the very foundations of their understanding of right and wrong. She confessed to poisoning Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, John Henry Lee, her mother Lillian, and her boyfriend Stewart Taylor. Despite the fact that arsenic was found in Jennings Barfield's body, Velma denied killing him. The motive for the murders was stealing money from her victims to support her clandestine addiction to prescription drugs. She had also taken out a loan in her mother's name. Each of her tragic choices, made under the influence of pain, had a devastating impact on her destiny and the people around her. Faced with the threat of exposure, Velma took a step that irrevocably altered the course of her life. The path from one crime to another can often be a slippery slope. She found herself repeating the unthinkable. Every time, Velma went to her victims' funerals and seemed to sincerely mourn their loss. The burden of her secret pushed her further into isolation. Yet the resilient human psyche, adept at self-preservation, often takes refuge in justification to shield itself from the unbearable truth and finds ways to rationalize even the darkest deeds. Every time Velma stole money from her victims, then poisoned them as they got suspicious. To the outside world, she remained a devout churchgoer, a seemingly caring nurse, and a loving family member. But her moral compass, once guided by faith, now veered into a realm of denial, caught in a constant struggle between the remnants of her conscience and the overwhelming desire to escape the consequences of her actions. She was forging checks on her boyfriend Stuart Taylor's account. Presumably, he discovered that, so she mixed an arsenic-based rat poison into his beer and tea, determined to maintain her secret at any cost. At the trial, Velma's defense pleaded insanity, but this was not accepted. She appeared cold and uncaring. She laughed at the prosecutor and even gave the district attorney a round of applause after his closing speech. The prosecution painted a picture of Velma not as the church-going grandmother she purported to be, but as a calculating murderer driven by darkness. She was the architect of her own fate, and her actions deserved the utmost penalty. The defense, in turn, sought to humanize her, portraying her not as a monster, but as a troubled soul ensnared by addiction, abuse, and circumstances beyond her control, highlighting her mental health struggles as a mitigating factor in her crimes. In the world of law and order, the truth is often more complex than it appears, inseparable from human emotions. Although she eventually confessed to 6 murders, she was convicted only of the first-degree murder of Stuart Taylor. In December 1978, the trial jury found aggravating circumstances and sentenced her to death. For the victims' families, the verdict was an acknowledgement of their irreplaceable loss. A designated holding area for female death row prisoners did not exist at the time, and Velma was the only female death row inmate in North Carolina. So she was imprisoned at Central Prison in Raleigh, in an area for escape-prone prisoners and prisoners with mental illnesses. Subsequently, a unit for female death row inmates was established at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. While on death row, Velma was off the drugs and expressed remorse for the years that the pills had blurred her judgment and destroyed her moral compass. In the solitude of her cell, she began the arduous process of confronting her past. The nights were long, the faces of her victims haunted her dreams, and the silence served as a backdrop for her thoughts and regrets. It was during these moments of reflection that Velma faced the full magnitude of her actions, the lives she had taken, and the pain she had caused. Her conversations with the prison chaplain were not just about seeking forgiveness from a higher power, but about understanding the nature of atonement and the painstaking process of forgiving oneself. In jail, Velma confessed that she had never been a true Christian. Her Christianity had been a matter of form and gesture. Then, finally, while waiting for her trial, she genuinely opened her heart to Jesus and received forgiveness and salvation. She wrote in her autobiography, "All my life I was weighted down by my sins because I couldn't do better. It never occurred to me that Jesus really did pay the price, that Jesus alone bore the extreme punishment, death, for my sins, not just for my good neighbors, and even more glorious, Jesus is willing to be my friend even now. I can talk to him and he will listen." She became a devout Christian and spent her 6 final years ministering to other inmates. Velma, in her own way, became a source of support to them. Her involvement in spiritual activities offered her a sense of community and belonging that had eluded her for much of her life. Her extensive participation in the Christian community led to a campaign to have her sentence commuted from death to life imprisonment. She wrote letters to Governor Jim Hunt telling him that her born-again Christian faith should be considered as a mitigating factor. She received support from many Christians across the United States, including evangelists Billy and Ruth Graham. Ruth kept in touch with Velma by mail. Her victims' families considered Velma's conversion a fraud and a ploy to save her life. To them, she was a woman who had killed their loved ones. Velma remained a loving mother and a caring grandmother. She enjoyed family visits every weekend and spent time with her children and grandchildren. Her new attorney, Richard Burr, said about her, "The person I saw was kind, sensitive, and loving. There was no hidden agenda with Velma. Whenever you were with her, she was who she was. From what I understand, that's how she lived her life in prison. So from the very beginning, I believed that when she committed those crimes, it was not the Velma Barfield mentally and emotionally that I was seeing and getting to know." Burr believed that Velma's pretrial evaluations were inadequate, so he turned to psychiatrist Selwyn Rose. Dr. Rose evaluated Velma in 1980 and testified in the state court. He said that she suffered from 3 disorders: a multiple prescription drug abuse disorder, an underlying personality disorder, and depression. However, Dr. Rose never felt as if he had put together a complete picture of Velma. As Burr had no license to practice in North Carolina, he now assisted Velma's new lawyer, Jimmy Little. As time was running out, Velma's son, Ronnie Burke, asked her if she had killed his father. She replied, "I'm sure I probably did." She couldn't remember clearly, but she believed that she had left a cigarette or a match in the bed and then closed the door, leaving her drunk husband to sleep in their burning house. She also admitted to the pastor who helped her right woman on death row that she had murdered Jennings Barfield. Velma said she was glad that this was finally over because she was afraid that she was going to poison her grandchildren. She didn't know why she did it, but she did it, and it was not something she could stop. North Carolina's governor refused Velma's request for clemency and said that her victims had been literally tortured to death. Additionally, an appeal was made based on testimony from a psychiatry professor who asserted that she suffered from dissociative identity disorder. Professor Dorothy Lewis, professor of psychiatry at New York University School of Medicine and an expert in violent behavior, picked up patterns of manic episodes in Velma's earlier life associated with the development of a manic depressive disorder. She said she had talked to Velma's other personality, Billy, who told her Velma had been a victim of sexual abuse and that he, Billy, had killed her abusers. The judge responded to this by saying, "One of them did it. I don't care which one." Velma's final appeal was filed on October 30th, 1984 in the North Carolina Supreme Court based on her being incompetent at her original trial due to her drug addiction. This appeal was denied in federal court. She told her attorney, Jimmy Little, to drop all appeals the day before she was executed, explaining that she wanted to die with as much dignity as the state of North Carolina will allow. Her last hours were spent in reflection and prayer, seeking comfort in her faith. As she was preparing for death, the famous Pastor Billy Graham told her over the phone, "Velma, in a way I envy you, because you're going to get to heaven before I do." Velma was executed on November 2nd, 1984, at Central Prison in Raleigh. She released a statement before her execution. "I want to say that I am sorry for all the hurt that I have caused. I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry, and I want to thank everybody who has been supporting me all these 6 years. I want to thank my family for standing with me through all this, and my attorneys and all the support to me, everybody, the people with the prison department. I appreciate everything, their kindness and everything that they have shown me during these 6 years." As her last meal, she chose a bag of cheese doodles and a Coca-Cola. She received final visits from her family members and friends. She wasn't scared and told one of them, "When I go into that gas chamber at 2 a.m., it's my gateway to heaven." She was wearing pink pajamas for the execution. A stethoscope and heart monitor were taped to her chest. The wheeled gurney was brought to her cell, and she was fastened to it with straps across her body and legs. Then she was wheeled into the execution chamber shortly before 2 a.m. Crowds of pro- and anti-death penalty demonstrators gathered outside the prison. Some of the protesters accused Governor Hunt of refusing to show mercy and compassion, arguing that she could lead a life of value behind bars and help other prisoners. Richard Burr said, "Politics and death have been mixed up in this case." Inmates were banging rhythmically on the windows of their cells, waiting for the execution. About 80 people who were in favor of capital punishment cheered and applauded. The execution was carried out by 3 volunteers. One of the intravenous lines was a dummy so that none of the volunteers knew which of them actually administered the lethal dose. Velma was declared dead at 2:15 a.m., 15 minutes after being administered the injection of procuronium bromide. Observers at the execution reported that she passed away peacefully with no apparent suffering or pain. About 300 opponents of the death penalty stood in silent vigil carrying candles that were extinguished as the moment of the execution passed. At 2:25 a.m., Velma's body was taken to a medical school by an ambulance. She had requested that her organs be used for transplantation. She was buried in a small North Carolina cemetery near her first husband, Thomas Burke. She was 52 years old. Singer-songwriter Jonathan Byrd, the grandson of Jennings Barfield and his first wife, wrote a song about Velma. 24-year-old Annie Lay was born in San Jose, California, and grew up in a big family. Described by those that knew her as conscientious, polite, and friendly to everyone she met, with a lot of tenacity and a great sense of humor. From a young age, she was known as an exceptional student. She was the valedictorian of her graduating high school class, and her classmates voted her the most likely to be the next Einstein. Annie earned $160,000 in scholarships and went on to obtain her undergraduate degree in cell development biology from the University of Rochester. It was here she met Jonathan Wyrowski. The young couple were inseparable from the get-go. Annie said he was her best friend, and before long, Jonathan asked her to marry him. September 13th, 2009 was set as the big day, and the wedding plans quickly got underway. After all those years of very intense and hard work, Annie was accepted into the prestigious Ivy League school, Yale University, hoping to earn her doctorate in pharmacology. She was always hands-on within her campus, getting involved in various extracurricular activities. She even wrote an article about campus safety titled Crime and Safety in New Haven for Yale Medical School's B magazine. Jonathan and Annie were living 76 miles apart at the time. Jonathan was at Columbia University, working on his own doctorate, and this only made their reunion for the wedding on the 13th even more special. September 7th, 2009, Annie was now in her final year at Yale. It was 5 days until the wedding, and it was safe to say Annie was as busy as ever. She was definitely feeling the stress of everything and called her friend Jennifer for some friendly words of encouragement. Jennifer said Annie asked if she thought they were too young to get married. But knowing this was normal nerves combined with the stress of Yale, Jennifer said she and Jonathan were absolutely making the right decision. Annie thanked her friend for telling her what she needed to hear, hung up, and carried on with her day. September 8th, 2009, Annie still had lots of work to do around the campus before she set off to Long Island. She left her apartment that morning and took the Yale Transit to her office located on campus. She then walked to her lab where she would conduct most of her research, and this was about a minute away at 10 Amistad Street's room G13. The day on campus soon drew to a close. Students were leaving to head home and various buildings were locking up. Annie's roommates had been expecting her home hours ago, but she was nowhere to be seen. It got to 9 p.m. and with no one able to get hold of her, her roommates called the New Haven Police Department and reported her missing. Her friend Jennifer said that Annie always made sure she was safe. She didn't walk around at night by herself, and if she ever had to work late, she would make sure someone would come and pick her up or walk home with her. So the fact that no one had received a call from her that day was very concerning. Police went to Annie's office, where they found her wallet, keys, purse, and phone, but there were no signs of a struggle inside. Her belongings still being in there indicated she had likely left that morning with the intention of returning to her office fairly soon after. None of her credit or debit cards had been used and her phone had no activity on it since she left it in the office. Her Yale ID card seemed to be the only thing from her purse that went with her that morning, and it had been used to get into the labs. CCTV confirmed it was Annie using her own ID card, and the footage captured her walking into 10 Amistad Street at around 10 a.m. She was carrying something that can't really be made out, but it's assumed it was something to do with her research. Although CCTV can't always convey a full story, it didn't look like anything was wrong with Annie that morning. She wasn't running away from anyone. She didn't seem to be in a rush, and no one stopped to talk to her on the way in. By all accounts, it seemed like very typical morning for her. Unfortunately, there was only one camera on the basement level where Annie's lab was located, and it didn't show her walking past or through the door at all. At 12:50 p.m. that day, a fire alarm sounded in the building, and everyone was evacuated. One of the lab technicians assigned to maintain room G13 was a man named Ray, and he came forward with information. He didn't attend Yale, but had worked there for a little while. He told authorities that he had clocked in at 7 a.m. and had seen Annie in G13. He then said he thought he had seen her leave the lab just before the fire alarm went off that afternoon. The footage continued to be looked at, and authorities went into the building to see if they could see anything. Every hallway, room, cupboard, and outside bin were searched, but nothing was there. Although Ray said he remembered her leaving, they couldn't see anything on the 70 cameras around the area that confirmed this. Yale offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Annie's whereabouts. Her fiancé flew in from New York, and her family traveled over from California to help with the search. Annie's odd disappearance quickly became big news. Reporters were all over the campus, and over 100 law enforcement officers joined the search too. Authorities weren't initially sure if they were dealing with an abduction or something even more sinister, but some believed Annie had maybe got cold feet about her wedding and run away. This was quickly refuted by her friends and family, however. Annie had been planning the wedding for over a year and hadn't ever shown any signs of changing her mind about it. One of her friends said she was doing weather patterns to make sure the weather would be perfect on her wedding day. She wanted everything to be perfect. Everything down to the table napkins to flowers. Annie was very, very excited about this day. Her disappearance just days before the wedding made no sense. With still nothing from Annie, a second search of the building was conducted. And this time a closer look at room G13 uncovered a drop of blood on one of the shelving units and in a back storage room, G22. Some beads that were determined to have been part of Annie's necklace were also found on the floor. On September 12th, after finding the blood, police started a more in-depth search of G13. Lifting up one of the ceiling tiles, they found a bloody sock and a single blue surgical glove. They then brought in luminol, which was used across the neighboring labs, including G22. More blood was found in there. There was also a distinctly terrible smell developing around the locker rooms and toilets near to G22, a smell that some of the officers knew all too well. Cadaver dogs were brought in to try and locate the source of it, and the whole building was declared a crime scene. A day later, 5 p.m. on September 13, 2009, Annie Lay's decomposing body was found, stuffed upside down, inside a wall behind a metal utility panel, in the basement of the building, near the lockers and room of G22. September 13th was the day that Annie should have been walking down the aisle, and it was a tragic end to the 5-day search. The state medical examiner determined that Annie had died from traumatic asphyxiation by neck compression. She had a broken jaw and broken collarbone, and these injuries happened to her when she was alive. Further examination showed evidence of a sexual assault. Near to her body was her key card and a blue surgical glove, that paired with the one found under the ceiling tile. DNA samples were taken from her clothes and the area around her body and sent off to see if there was a hit on the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. A vigil was held for Annie on campus, and the loss of one of their own hung heavily over the staff and students. The school made grief counselors available for everyone, as well as a 24-hour helpline to anyone that needed it. Because of the access codes and IDs that people needed to get around the campus, Officer Joe Avery said they were not investigating this as a random act, instead believing it to be an inside job. He also said they didn't believe that any of the students were involved and no one else was in any danger. This was reiterated by Robert Alpern, Dean of the Yale School of Medicine. Said, "I think that it suggests it was someone who could get into that space. It certainly would be extremely difficult for someone outside of Yale to get into that space. Not impossible, but extremely difficult." This only added to the foreboding feeling hanging over the already fighting campus. Students were scared about moving from class to class. Some said they were now traveling in big groups, even during the middle of the day. Others were turning down shifts at work around the university, for fear that whoever had done this was likely still walking around the campus too. It wasn't long before a hit came back on the DNA. A match came back to a convicted felon named Kieran Robinson. This was not actually the clear-cut answer police had been looking for. It was soon confirmed that Kieran had been shot and killed a long time before anything in Annie's case had ever happened, and his DNA being near her body could be easily explained. Kieran had actually been one of the people that helped with some construction on that particular building in the years before he died, and with no other matches on the Cody's database, police were still searching. More days would pass, and by this point, detectives had reviewed about 700 hours of video and interviewed over 150 people. There was one more person that had been on the detectives' radar since the start, but they didn't quite have enough to prove anything just yet. Using the keycard data, it was confirmed that only 2 other people had swiped into room G13 that day. One was a third-party contractor that was ruled out very quickly, and the other was 24-year-old Raymond Clark, the lab technician that told police he had seen Annie leaving the building that day. Little did Ray know, this one claim to police had put him straight in their eye line, as the cameras had already confirmed she absolutely did not leave. He had a reputation of being controlling and often quite nasty to any students that left the lab dirty. Ray had in fact emailed Annie to complain about her leaving dirty mice cages behind after one of her studies. That being said, Yale had no record of disciplinary action taken against him at any point. Others, however, said Ray was pleasant and personable. Between 10:40 a.m. that morning until around 3:45 p.m., Ray had gone in and out of G13 and G22 a total of 55 times. This was confirmed using his keycard and the cameras. They also captured Ray leaving when the fire alarm went off that afternoon and coming back in at 1:10. He walked around the basement area wearing slightly different scrubs, before clocking off, just before 4 p.m. At one point during the day, Ray went out onto the streets and sat down on the steps with his head in his hands. When police spoke to him, they noticed scratches on his face and arm, along with some fairly fresh bruises. He said the scratches came from a cat. He was asked to come in for a polygraph test, which shows signs of deception, but as always, a polygraph test is not admissible, and this wasn't enough for them to hold him. They asked him to submit a DNA sample before he left, which he did, and with this, he was let go, while they awaited the results. A total of 4 search warrants and the results of the DNA test had finally confirmed that he was Annie's killer. The bloody sock found in the wall and the lab coat Ray was wearing contained both sets of DNA. Ray had signed into the building that day with a green pen. A green pen was found under Annie's body with both hers and Ray's DNA on it. This, along with the keycard data and camera footage, cemented everything. They believe Annie was killed just before the fire alarm went off. Ray quickly changed his scrubs, which had blood on them, and left Annie in the lab before heading out when the alarm went off, before hurrying back in, moving her body through G22 and then forcing her behind the panel. All police could find that might have pointed to some sort of motive was an email. On the day Annie was killed, she sent out a mass email to the whole building saying that she was getting married on the 13th and would be away for a few days on her honeymoon. Ray had opened this email. Ray was engaged to be married too, and police could only speculate on this. But they wondered if Ray had had a secret obsession with Annie for a while, and reading this email spiraled into a fit of jealousy and rage. He was held on a $3 million bond, and his lawyer told people he was expected to plead not guilty. Annie would soon be laid to rest, and her funeral was broadcast live online. Her mother Vivian made an emotional speech. Jonathan also wore the wedding ring Annie should have given him. Despite initially pleading not guilty, Ray Clark soon changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to murder in exchange for a 44-year sentence. He was also found guilty of attempting to commit a sexual assault. The sexual assault plea was entered into Connecticut's Alford Doctrine, which means the defendant doesn't agree to the facts, but acknowledges that the state has enough evidence to gain a conviction. Ray Clark is scheduled for release in 2053. He will be almost 70 years old. Ray's father, Raymond Clark Jr. said, "It is with a heavy heart that I stand here before you today. We will live out our life knowing that he is behind bars. But we are proud of Ray for taking responsibility for his actions and pleading guilty. I want you to know that Ray has expressed extreme remorse from the very beginning. I can't tell you how many times he has sobbed uncontrollably, telling me how sorry he is, telling me how his heart is tortured by the reality that he caused the death of Annie's mother, did not attend the sentencing because it was too painful, but she said her family were happy with the result. Although Annie's killer was caught and convicted, the real reason behind her death remains a total mystery, as Ray has never said or explained why. A Yale spokesman, Michael Moran, said, "As the criminal proceedings come to a close, we renew our commitment to honor the memory of Annie Lay, whose joy of life and learning is an inspiration to faculty, students, and staff at Yale, now and for the future." Annie had a bright future ahead of her in so many ways, just days away from marrying her best friend and soon to complete a doctorate she had worked so very hard for. Annie's friend Natalie said she was as good a human being as you'd ever hope to meet. 22-year-old Brandon Gonsalves lived with his small family in Goregaon West. Now Goregaon West was becoming a crowded suburb in Mumbai city. Besides Gonsalves, his family only consisted of his mother and older sister. On December 19, 2016, like every day, Gonsalves went for a morning walk from his home to Ari Colony. Usually, he would return home within an hour after his stroll, but today he didn't come back until afternoon. Concerned, Gonsalves' mother, Seema, and older sister, Kashma, first called his friends because he had left his phone at home today. Despite contacting some friends, they couldn't find any information about Gonsalves. Now, the sun had already set, and night was slowly falling. Worried about their son, Seema took her daughter and went to the nearby Dindoshi police station to file a missing person report. Now, besides Gonsalves' family and friends, police are also trying to find him. Meanwhile, the Dindoshi police station had distributed Gonsalves' photo to nearby police stations as well. However, amidst this, around 12:30 in the afternoon on December 22nd, a call comes to the nearby Ari police station. The caller reports that he has just seen a headless body. Upon hearing this, the police promptly rushed to the reported location in Ari Colony. Upon arrival, the scene that a witness astonishes them. There, beneath a tree, lies a body without a head, neck, or clothes. And upon seeing it, it seemed as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Now witnessing this sight, the police cordoned off the area completely, not allowing any ordinary person to approach. Afterwards, the police began their investigation by first examining the area nearby. Just 20 meters away from the body, the police found the head and clothes stained with blood. Additionally, a few meters away from the body, the police also found some other items used in worship, such as a mirror, coconut, padukas, threads, turmeric powder, and kumkum powder, aka vermilion. Anyway, the police collected these items and sent the body to a nearby hospital for post-mortem. Subsequently, the files of missing persons were checked at the Ari police station, and the identification of this dead body was made with a boy named Brandon Gonsalves. As I mentioned earlier, the missing report of Brandon Gonsalves had been distributed to all nearby police stations by Dindoshi police. So now the Ari police confirmed that he was the same boy who had gone missing 3 days ago on December 19th. Well, now Gonsalves' family is also informed, and thus the missing case of Gonsalves turns into a murder case. After this, as far as I have read, perhaps the police had to form 8+ teams to search for Gonsalves' killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But seeing the body of her only son in this condition, Gonsalves' mother Seema and elder sister, Kashma, were both in a terrible state of distress. So much so that when Seema saw her son in this condition, she fainted upon seeing the body. However, the police quickly began their investigation to find the culprits. On the other hand, some shocking details emerged in Gonsalves' post-mortem report. The post-mortem report stated that Gonsalves' tongue, voice box, skin from his right cheek, and even his entire neck were missing, with the neck bone intact. This means that someone had killed Gonsalves so brutally that even the small spine as fragment of our neck, the neck spine, was broken. All these things were horrifying the police because initially, the police thought this case seemed to be a result of personal rivalry, as if someone had killed Gonsalves to settle a score. But the police were soon to be proven wrong. Actually, according to the post-mortem report, it was found that Gonsalves' death occurred due to the separation of his head from his body. However, forensic pathologists also checked whether Gonsalves was given any drugs or substances before being killed. But nothing like that was found in any postmortem report. After that, the police found out that Goncalves was murdered 3 days before his body was found, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the same day he went missing. Additionally, there were no signs of any fight, struggle, or injury on his body, indicating that Goncalves didn't even try to save himself until his last breath. Furthermore, 2 marks were found on Goncalves' body. Actually, there were 2 cross symbols on his forehead and right hand, which seemed to have been made with a sharp object. After learning about all these things, this case became even more intriguing for the police and investigators, because now there were a lot more questions in front of the police. Looking at Goncalves' body, it seemed as if his body had been cut twice. First, his head was separated from his shoulders, and then later his neck was cut from the head. Additionally, forensic experts said that where Goncalves' body was found, there was absolutely no evidence of his murder, if not a single trace of blood was found there. So it was clear that Goncalves was killed somewhere else, and then some parts of his body were removed to perform some rituals or something similar. Later, his body and clothes were thrown away in this deserted place. Here, when the police found the materials of worship in glass, coconuts, slippers, turmeric, and vermilion at the crime scene, for the first time, this case seems like a human sacrifice. After the possibility arose that Goncalves might be taken to another location and harmed, the police began checking the CCTV cameras around the Ari colony. But first, they checked the CCTV cameras around his house. They saw Goncalves leaving with his dog around 7 o'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. However, just 10 minutes later, Goncalves left his house again, but this time with a bag. Now, what was in that bag could not be determined because the bag itself was not found. But then, a little further from Goncalves' house, the police spotted a white Audi car in another CCTV footage with 2 people inside, a driver and a woman in a white Punjabi suit. It was shown in the CCTV that they were following Goncalves slowly with their car. The woman wearing a white Punjabi suit is given directions to the driver, telling him to take the car in that direction. However, the police also questioned Goncalves' family members to see if anyone might know that woman and driver. But the police didn't get any good response from there either. The police suspected that there might be more than 2 people in the car. And unfortunately, the day Goncalves' body was found, the 2 CCTV cameras in that area were not working. This raised suspicion for the police that Goncalves was abducted on December 19th in this same car and then murdered elsewhere, with his body being thrown in a deserted place in Ari colony on the dark night or morning of December 22nd. But since then, investigators have felt that perhaps a local person might be involved in this murder case, because the police checked 70-plus CCTV cameras in this entire case, but none of them recorded anything suspicious that would raise suspicion on any individual. The investigators clarified that perhaps the killers were aware of the location of every CCTV camera in the Ari colony. This helped them in escaping from the colony and Goregaon. This clears one thing, that the killer was someone who was well acquainted with Goregaon and the colony, because an outsider couldn't have known every road in CCTV so well. The investigators explored all possible angles of Goncalves' killing, such as a love affair angle, whether someone jealous killed Goncalves, and a personal rivalry, human sacrifice angle, robbery, and property dispute. But the police never found any leads in any angle. Although for some time, the police kept the angle of human sacrifice on the table and even questioned several tantrics, babas, and black magicians about the cut parts of the body, the mark of the cross on the forehead and the right hand, whether there was any connection between them or not. But the police didn't get any help from here either. Goncalves was a middle-class boy who decided to graduate in arts. However, due to some reasons, he dropped out of college as well. His father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Goncalves in a state of depression for a long time. During the police investigation, Goncalves' call records were also checked, but no suspicious numbers were found. In fact, Goncalves rarely talked to anyone except for his family or perhaps 3 or 4 friends. But what intrigued the police in this case was finding a diary in Goncalves' room. Within it were some sketches that further complicated this case. Actually, if these sketches are examined closely, it will be apparent that they tell the story of 2 sacrifices. In the first, a person is attempting to cut off an animal's head while wearing a suit. Meanwhile, in the second sacrifice, a man's head is being cut off with a saw. In addition to these, an attempt has been made to portray the SpongeBob cartoon character as a monster. On the other side of the page, a picture of a deer without a head has been drawn, and right next to it, only the head of a lion cub has been drawn. Furthermore, when the police went inside Don Salva's house, they found a strange sign on a wall just behind the door, as if it were some sort of cult symbol. Now, what was even more surprising was that when the Mumbai police tried to recreate the crime scene with Goncalves' dog, the startling thing was that Goncalves' dog went straight to where Goncalves' body was lying with a tree. After a while, his dog arrived at the spot where Goncalves' body was found, just a few meters away. Among all the cases we've explained on this channel so far, this case was the weirdest, like how Goncalves' dog somehow went to the places where his body was found. It's possible that when Goncalves first went out for a walk with his dog on December 19th, he might have already gone to the place where his body was found. Another point is that the white Audi car following Goncalves might have been known to him, and he might have gone with them willingly, sitting in the car. Additionally, it's possible that after returning home, Goncalves took the bag with him, which might have contained items related to worship like coconut, padukas, etc., because it's also being said on the internet that maybe Goncalves sacrificed himself. Today, it's been over 7 years since this case, but the murderer of Brandon Goncalves is still unknown. Meanwhile, Goncalves' mother and sister have made numerous visits to the police station and the crime branch office to find out the status of their son, Brandon Goncalves' murder case. During this time, Goncalves' mother and sister were afraid that the police might close Goncalves' murder case. Due to this reason, Seema's elder daughter, Kashma, appealed to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the state's chief minister to seek justice. Well, if this case gets solved in the future, we will definitely update you through this channel's community post. But so far, this case remains unsolved. With this, Brandon Goncalves case also concludes here. Before moving forward, quickly subscribe to the channel. This is strange. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Quickly subscribe to it. Now we are jumped to the next story. This is the story of Madanapalli city in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India, which is Asia's largest tomato market. Besides, there are many mountains here as well. It was January 24th, 2021, around 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night in Madanapalli, when Dr. V. Pradushatham Naidu, the head of the Naidu family, called his friend Raju and said on the phone, "Both my daughters are no longer in this world. Alkia, 27, and Sadivya, 22, have both passed away. But there's nothing to worry about. Tomorrow morning, they will come back through reincarnation because the Kal Yuga is ending and the Sat Yuga will begin from tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Raju said to his friend, "Dr. Naidu, everything is normal at home. Speaking such language against your daughters doesn't suit you." In response, Dr. Naidu said, "No, Raju, I am telling the truth. In a while, both I and your sister-in-law will leave our bodies in Kalyug and be born again in Satyug." Upon hearing this, Dr. Naidu's friend, Raju, started feeling extremely restless. Consequently, he abruptly ended the call, and within a few minutes arrived at Dr. Naidu's house. Raju reached there, knocked on the door, and just as the door was about to open, Dr. Naidu himself appeared, looking completely normal. But when Raju went inside and saw the scene there, his eyes widened in shock because Dr. Naidu had spoken the truth. Lying on the ground in the prayer room of his house was the lifeless body of his 27-year-old daughter, Alakia. She had completed her master's in Bhopal and now was preparing for the civil services. Her face was pale and blood was oozing from various places. After this, Dr. Naidu took Raju to another room adjacent to the prayer room where the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Sadivya, lay on the ground. She had been struck with a trident of Lord Shiva on her forehead, and a small brass pot placed in the prayer room was inserted into her mouth. The clothes were removed from both bodies and they were wrapped in red cloth. Additionally, their hair was partially cut and they were placed in front of the statue of Lord Shiva in the temple. They had scattered many worship materials around the bodies. However, despite seeing the bodies of their daughters, there was no sign of tension or sorrow on the faces of Dr. Naidu and his wife Padmaja. This behavior of his friend and his wife seemed very strange to Raju. Therefore, he bids them goodbye and leaves their house. However, instead of going home, he goes straight to the police station and tells the police the whole story of how these educated parents sacrificed their daughters. He also informs them about the mental condition of Dr. Naidu and his wife. However, the police didn't having little belief in Raju's story after hearing this strange tale, because for the past year, Dr. Naidu and his family, who had been living in the new house in Madanapal, had earned quite a reputation in the city. Anyway, after that, the police station in charge, along with some officers, directly reached the Naidu family's house. When the police knocked on the door, once again it was Dr. Naidu who opened it, but seeing her husband's friend with him, Padmaja got very angry and started shouting at the police because they had once again disrupted their worship. Now, the argument between the police and the Naidu family had attracted neighbors from nearby. Now, as soon as the police entered the house and saw what was inside, they too were astonished. Later, after hearing Raju, the police realized that it was a case of superstition. Although Mr. and Mrs. Naidu repeatedly tried to convince the police that both their daughters would return to life before sunrise tomorrow, they were just saying that they only need a day's time. And tomorrow morning both our daughters will come back to life. Then you all will be surprised. But the police knew that both girls were dead. So how could they come back to life? Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Naidu were first explained with great difficulty. But when they still didn't understand, the police showed some firmness and took both of them to the police station. Afterwards, a forensic team was called in to investigate the crime scene. The forensic team continued their examination for some time and then sent the bodies for postmortem. Now, the police have started investigating both inside and outside the house. Here, the police learned from neighbors of the Naidu family that someone from the family used to go out daily to buy something. But for the past 3 days, no one has come out of the house, nor has anyone gone inside. Not even the maid who used to clean the house, as these people did not even call her. After that, the police directly approached the maid, who told them that 3 days ago, she was told by the Naidus that we are going to perform a special worship in the house for 3 days, and until we call you, do not come to work at the house. On the other hand, upon checking both girls' social media profiles and bookshelves inside the house, the police found out that Alakia highly respects Indian philosopher Osho. On his social media posts, Osho's name appeared repeatedly, indicating that he was one of Alikia's favorite people. Additionally, beside Alikia's dead body was a book by the spiritual guru Meher Baba. Besides, pictures of Shwai Sai Baba, Meher Baba, and Osho were plastered all over their house. Furthermore, neighbors often heard prayers and tantric chants from their house, and several times they saw some swamis entering the house. On the other hand, what was surprising was that just a few days before the murder, Alakia posted twice on her Instagram. In one post, she wrote, "Work is done," and in the second post, "Shiva is coming." Well, only Dr. Naidu and Padmaja, who were present in the custody, could reveal the truth behind this. However, controlling Padmaja was proving to be extremely difficult for the police. But before the custody, when the police were taking both husband and wife for a COVID test, Padmaja started saying, "I am Shiva myself because of my body particles. COVID has spread everywhere. It did not come from China." After getting their COVID tests done, Dr. Naidu informed the police about his background. Actually, Dr. Naidu had a master's in philosophy and science. In addition, he had obtained a PhD and was currently a professor of chemistry at Government Degree College for Women, not in a poly. His wife Padmaja was a gold medalist in mathematics and had been teaching at the famous schools of Madanapal for nearly 23 years, including at Mastermind's IIT Tawant High School. Alongside, she also had a master's in science. Additionally, Alekia, 27, was a postgraduate from Bhopal and then an aspirant for civil services. Furthermore, Saidivya, a 22-year-old, was training at the A.R. Rama Music Conservatory in Mumbai after completing her Bachelor of Business Administration course. However, due to the lockdown, both of them had to return home. You might also wonder why, with such educated family members, these individuals attempted suicide. You'll find the answer by the end of the video. Afterwards, Alakia picked up Lord Shiva's trident from the temple and thrust it into her sister Divya's forehead. Then a copper vessel was placed in her mouth. Following the death of her younger sister Divya, Alakia told her mother that now she had to kill her. As a result, Padmarja struck Alakia on the head with a dumbbell kept in the house. Consequently, Alakia also died shortly thereafter. After killing both their daughters, both the husband and wife wandered around their bodies for quite some time. Now, because of the insistence of the wife and daughter, it was Dr. Nayudu's turn. Perhaps out of fear, he called his friend and told him the whole matter, and if he hadn't made that call, perhaps neither of them would be in this world today. However, due to this, Padmaja scolded her husband, Dr. Nayudu, a lot, saying, "You are a coward because of you our secret got out and our daughters couldn't come back." After seeing all this, it was finalized in this case that due to mental illness, all these family members had planned this. And it was revealed from a psychiatrist's source that their entire family was dealing with a rare disorder called shared psychotic disorder. Actually, in this disorder, more than two people who are in close relationships have a similar way of thinking. And it's because of this disorder that Alakia and Sedivia are no longer in this world today. In this double murder case, Alakia had a Canadian friend who told the print media that he couldn't believe for many days that Alakia could do such a thing. After questioning on Monday evening, the funeral of both these girls were performed, and permission for this was given only to Dr. Nayudu, while the girl's mother Padmaja was not allowed to participate for some reasons. In my opinion, this case, Sedivia and Dr. Purushottam Nayudu seem innocent to me. Although if they hadn't fallen into the temptation of Alakia and Padmaja, perhaps this would have been a happy family today. So with this, the case comes to an end here. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.